Which episode is this? 174?
This is 174.
This 174th iteration of the Bookworm podcast.
Yep. This is by far the most current episode of Bookworm you could be listening to right now.
That's true. I bought another DBX 286S to bring up to Door County.
Oh, nice. See, my tendency would be like buy a rack that's movable and just take it with me. That would be my tendency.
Well, it's on my desk, and all the wires are like, yeah.
I get it. I do.
You mean like a Roadcaster Pro type rack? Or
no,
like an actual rack case.
Like an actual rack case that I would like undermount on the desk or something. Like that's my tendency. Like even, well, this is church related, but there are times when I want like 3, 4, 5 wireless headsets or handhelds for a specific scenario. And it was always a pain to get that done. So we took our entire wireless bank and put it into a rolling road case. So now anytime I want, I can unplug the cables from the back of this patch panel I built into the back of it and take 10 wireless systems with me, complete with fins on top and the whole thing. And boom, plug in the cables. I got 10 wireless setups anywhere I want in the building. It's the way to do it. But you got to spend money on road cases and stuff when you're doing that. But that's the way it goes. Let's see. I have check. Okay. Well, anything else we need to talk about before we start this glorious episode?
I don't think so. Get audio hijack open. Oh, I have some shiny new something since we recorded last.
Some shiny new something since we were okay.
Yeah, I have a Apple Studio display.
Oh, any particular reason you went that route?
It started with a dock failure about 2 hours before Obsidian University.
That's fun.
Can I get a Thunderbolt 4 dock so I can actually use my gear that I need?
Yep.
Well, I could order one, obviously, but it's not going to be here till tomorrow, the earliest. And I don't live close to a big city.
Yep.
So there's like Best Buy. That's it. And they've got Belkin ones, and I'm like,
yeah.
Talked to David Sparks. He's like, what you really need is the Elements Hub. I'm like, okay, I'll get the Elements Hub. But couldn't find it anywhere. So then I was like, well, Best Buy's got an open box studio display, and that's got Thunderbolt dock built into it. Because basically what was happening is I was plugging in my cable from my dock to my computer, and nothing would turn on. It would like kind of sort of turn on, like you could hear it whirring, but nothing ever showed up. The minute I unplugged everything, it worked. So it wasn't the computer. I had these 2 useless monitors and nothing else, that was plugged into them that I could actually use. So I'm like, this is not acceptable. So I bought it and spent quite a bit of time troubleshooting afterwards. Found out it actually wasn't the dock. It was a backup hard drive, spinning backup hard drive. So like it wouldn't actually mount, but it was causing everything else to just not load.
Sure.
So eventually replaced that drive, but the studio display is so nice that I kept
it. Nice.
Worked out okay because I've been doing more stuff from Door County, and I brought one of the monitors I had up there.
Sure.
I'm not hunched over on the little laptop. And then the other one went upstairs to the family computer because we had probably a 15-year-old monoprice monitor up there at this point. And it was just too big for the space anyways. So now there's a 24-inch LG 4K.
Nice.
Instead.
I use the CalDigit Thunderbolt 4 dock. That's what I use.
Okay.
Which
yeah, I think that's the one.
Yeah, some people struggle with it because it's Thunderbolt, not HDMI, or not Thunderbolt, DisplayPort, not HDMI out on it. I think that's the one.
Okay.
The Thunderbolt 3 one was that way. I forget if this one is or not. So I know that people have struggled with that, but I just grabbed a Thunderbolt to HDMI cord and just run it Thunderbolt out of the dock for the display. That's what I do. But I can't say I've really had issues with it. I didn't really have issues with the Thunderbolt 3 dock from them either. But that's me.
Yeah. I have never used HDMI. Well, that's not true. I used it when I had the Mac Mini for a little while. But the Thunderbolt USB-C has been the primary way. I had like a dongle that converted to HDMI, so I could hack two monitors into an M1 Mac Mini.
Yep. Yep. But I get that. Well, should we do this? Jose's ready to go.
Yeah, let me just do one other thing here. Gotta check. Okay. Think I'm good. You're already running, right? I just gotta hit record.
I am. I just need to do the magic marker drop.
All right. 3. Oh, I'll wait till you're ready.
You're fine. Go ahead.
3, 2, 1.
So this might be a first for Bookworm, Mike. In that we're recording on a Saturday morning. Have we ever done that before?
I don't know. I'm okay if we don't do it again.
I'm not super thrilled that we're doing this, but with the 4th of July, as we're recording this is the weekend before the 4th of July. I'm wrapped up with all sorts of stuff Monday and Tuesday. Mike's out of town the rest of the week, which means that we had set ourselves up to record yesterday, but some brilliant person doing road work up the street from me decided to cut the internet line, the main, going to our area, which means that I had no internet yesterday. So Mike and I were talking about, do we just do this over a phone call? It's like, well, then I was neck deep in all sorts of stuff trying to get church stuff done that didn't have internet. It was a mess, absolute mess. So here we are recording Saturday morning as a makeup for that. I'm grateful I have internet right now. Here's hoping it holds out. I haven't been here long enough to know if it's stable or not, but so far it seems fine. But
don't plant those seeds in my head, Joe Beelig. I hadn't even thought about that. The fact that the internet may disappear while we're recording.
Yep. That would be unfun. So if that happens and you're watching the live stream, my apologies. Mike and I will have to jump on a phone call and finish this because there is no other time for us to do this. So
me knocking on wood right now.
Yeah, I would, but this is plastic, so that doesn't work. So anyway, that's fun. Let's get past that topic because it's unfun. Let's do follow-up. I guess I can go first here. I've got 5. 2 of these are carryovers, which were carryovers. And I did these, Mike. I did do these, so I do not have to carry these over again. The first of these was to list 10 things for I know I'm being successful when. I'm going to read these off really fast because I feel like this is always fun to hear what other people come up with on these things.
Yeah, let's do it.
I always like hearing what you've got on this, but these are not in any particular order because I haven't figured out how to order them, to be honest. Do I want them most important to least or vice versa? Anyway, so number 1, my kids are not asking for my time. The thing behind that meaning like I'm giving them my time without them having to request it. Anyway, 2, I can hear God's voice. I can look people in the eyes when having a conversation. 4, there are no credible complaints about an event. Credible being the key word on that. Going home is not stressful. People around me are learning what I'm learning. I can write something down once. I think it's done. That's a problem for me. I have thought it through ahead of time. My workplace is peaceful, and I feel refreshed. There's a whole bunch of stuff around this that basically requires other things that I'm not talking about. Things like I have thought it through ahead of time. Well, it means I'm taking the time to think on my own and not having to come up with it on the fly. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes behind these. But anyway, that was a fun exercise and one that gave me a lot of pause to try to think through what to come up with for that one. Super fun.
That is cool. I did not do that one.
Okay, so we need to leave that one bold. Is that what we need to do in our notes?
Yeah, you can. So Michael Porter did it. He posted in the faith-based productivity community his list, and so I have people who aren't even having this as an official action item beating me to the completion of this. I feel a little bit bad about that, but it's been a couple of weeks. Obsidian University's almost done. One more week to go.
Well, I've got one other one here that's been a carryover, which was to come up with my own filtering questions. I did this one as well, Mike. And I came up with 4 questions that kind of correspond to the core values thing that I worked on through your life theme cohort. These 4 questions, basically these are questions for, should I be doing something or take something on, et cetera, et cetera. The first of these is, does this draw me closer to God? The second is, does this help me eliminate distractions? Does this create chaos or busyness? Does this help others? Again, there's a whole bunch of background that can go into those, but that's where I landed. Kind of an interesting thing to come up with those questions, but at the same time, I was like, I feel like there's stuff that I would need to say yes to that slips through those. So I'm not sure they're 100%, but that's at least my starting point for them. Interesting concept, nonetheless. So those were the 2 that I had for carryovers. The 3 that I had for new from last time, 2 of which I did, 1 of which I decided this is a bad idea. The first one was to examine the church.
Let me see if I can guess which one is a bad idea.
Okay.
All right, so we've got time blocking on here.
Yes.
I'm going to assume that's the one that you bailed on.
No, actually, it's not.
Right, all right.
Though I would have guessed the exact same thing being in your shoes. The first one was to examine the church tech space, basically the reverse engineering piece, right? Of looking at people who are working in that space. I had originally been working through writing blog posts for that space. And as I did the research on that, I realized that very few people are doing that. Now, that either means that it's ripe for the picking, or it means that it's really hard to do. And I think what I'm realizing is that's actually fairly hard to do because so many times it needs to have like some form of a visual with it. And most people are doing video for that. So I got to rethink like what I'm capable of doing in that time-wise. So that's something I need to actually work through that one with my wife a little bit, time-wise and such. So that's one of the 3. The second one was to make a checklist for examining an idea. And I had started the process of when a new idea comes in, this is similar to like the filtering questions. What are the things I need to consider before saying yes to that idea? And one of the things that I was putting on that was, is this going to take more time than the value I will get out of it is worth? And whenever I wrote that down, I realized that the chances of me using a checklist for an idea like this is very slim. So the time spent making a checklist for the idea of making that checklist was not worth the time. So I was like, okay, well, the thing I'm doing right now is very meta. Didn't even make it past that. So I scratched it. Like, okay, we're not going to do this. And that was line number 1. So maybe I did it. Maybe I didn't. I started to do it and decided it was a bad idea and didn't do it. So there you go. I don't know if that counts or not, but I'm not going to do it. So there's that.
Take credit for it.
Just saying. Sure. We'll put the check mark on it. Given that you're not going to argue me on it. Anyway, the last one, plan my day each day, the time blocking piece. I did this every work day since we last recorded. And I have had mostly successful results. I had one day where it completely fell apart. That was partially because of an event that was needing someone to run it, but it wasn't put on the calendar. That's a problem. That seems to happen more often than it should. A big group of people shows up and says, "Hey, where's our sound guy?" Like, didn't know you had an event. Did you tell us about it? Well, so that's a no. So that means I wasn't planning to run this for you. Anyway, that day got all blown up. But most of the time, I've had success with this. And as weird as this is, I've been doing that in reminders, just the standard Apple reminders. And that sounds kind of strange when I say it out loud, but at the same time, like, it works really well for me. I don't know. That's a weird thing. This is a side note. That's a weird thing. I feel like I've been going back to more and more of like the Apple built-in apps over time.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Like, I've been using just the calendar app. I've been using reminders. I don't use notes. So maybe it's just those two. But those are like crucial. Anyway, I'm rambling about it. How about you, Mike? How about your follow-up?
My follow-up. Well, I had mixed success. The carryovers did not happen. Still need to make my list of things for I know I'm being successful when. The immediate I know I'm being successful when is I get a break.
Fair enough.
City University's been going great, but it is a ton of work. I should have never done multiple teaching sessions in the same week, given the fact I had to make them from scratch. But one more week to go.
When you said you were doing a couple of these things in conjunction with each other, like, oh boy, that's not something I ever want to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's going really well. Once I have them, I have them. They're assets. I can break them apart. I can build out like more permanent evergreen stuff inside of City University. So that's kind of the plan. Yeah, but it's definitely a lot of work. I'm proud of what's coming out of it, but that has been taking up all my time. I did not teach my family to call each other out when in the gap. I did do the other two though, kinda. So reverse engineer some creators from Craft and Commerce. One of the creators that I walked away pretty impressed with what they had built was Jay Klaus. He is the creator science guy. And I attended a newsletter workshop that he did, and it was really good. And just really impressed with what he's built. He used to do the community for Pat Flynn with Smart Passive Income, and then left to do his own thing. So, I mean, if there's one person you're going to learn about how to build a community from, it would be Jay Klaus. So, I have joined the starter of his community, the lab it's called. So I don't have access to everything, but I do have access to some of his courses, the workshops, stuff like that. So I'm starting to like poke around in there and just kind of seeing what sort of sequences he's created for like when you join his membership community. Obviously got a look at the thought process behind the email sequences and things with the newsletter masterclass thing that he did. And that has led me to working with Matt Ragland as a kind of email coach. He has a service where they'll take your content and break it up and post it automatically for you as emails. That's not actually what I'm working with him on, but that's like his big offer. And I just been a fan of Matt's for a really long time, and really like his approach to things. He's kind of been through my process already of leaving the day job and having a launch and figuring out what happens after that. And so I'm looking forward to learning from him. I remember a couple of years ago seeing something he did with his newsletter list where it was kind of like a choose your own adventure style game in terms of productivity advice. Like you picked your path and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's a really cool idea. So he's gonna the goal is to help me kind of think through what am I going to do with email as the back end here. I feel like that's really the place to start for all my business stuff. I'm good at making stuff. Okay at like launching things, but other than that, like I don't have any sort of email systems in place to continuously deliver the message and value to people. That's the my focus. Like I'm trying to reverse engineer the email systems at the moment. So progress is being made on that. Money is being spent on that. Hopefully in a few weeks I'll have some results to share on that.
Fair enough.
And then redo timer. I kind of did this out of necessity. I wouldn't say it's done yet. There's still more work to do here, but kind of modifying the timers because I have gotten back into tracking my time. 50 hours so far this week, probably another 10 today. But so that's a bittersweet completed action item.
Yeah.
Maybe it was better when I didn't know.
That's the one thing I do track is how much time am I spending at work. And so it's just a one timer on off period. I start it when I come into work, shut it off when I leave so that I can make sure I'm not, because my tendency is I will run 50, 60 hours a week and not realize it and then wonder why I don't have time to do things around the house. Like I will get to that point. So it's more of a stop loss, to use a term from today's book. But
oh, hey, real quick, one more thing I should have mentioned, because you mentioned the life theme thing, and I jotted down a note.
Mm-hmm.
This is why we don't record on Saturday mornings. My brain's not working yet. I've had quite a few people talk to me about the life theme stuff. The people who went through it keep bringing it back up. So I'm guessing that it was probably pretty good. So one of the things that I'm going to do, I actually have all of these written already. I'm going to put together a 5-day email course on developing a life theme as kind of like a precursor to the next cohort, but it basically is the 5 steps from that. So I'm going to put some public accountability out there. By the time this goes live, I'm going to have that available. So I'm going to put the link in the show notes for people who want to sign up for that, because apparently I don't do anything unless I have a forcing function to do it.
Nice. The thing I love about that cohort was the fact that there is there's an accountability that comes with it of, here's the thing I need you to do before we do the next session. And it doesn't take long. I think in most cases I had maybe 10 minutes in it, which these are all things I probably could have done on my own, but won't, because I wasn't a part of a group and expected to talk about it later. So I love that about it. So it went really well. I'm a fan. It's informed a lot of decisions on my part. So I look at that as a very big win on your part. So well done, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you. You should leave me a testimonial.
I should do that. Yeah, I can do that. I'm writing it down now.
Cool. I'll send you the link.
Perfect. All right, let's get into...
Before we even got to the book.
I know. This is not fair. This is how my life goes. Even in, what was it? I think it was the last cohort session. There was somebody on or no, I think it was one of the Obsidian University sessions. Somebody was trying to give me action items. Like, what is the deal here? Why do people always want to give me the action items? It's not fair.
Sorry.
I just say no. It's okay. I'm good at quitting, apparently, which is today's book. Let's jump into that because that's awesome. Quit by Annie Duke. Tagline on this one is "The power of knowing when to walk away." And I can't help but hear the song in my head. And this is one that I think I've seen recommended in a few different scenarios. A close friend of mine recommended it to me personally. And going through it, I have lots of thoughts. It's pretty much exactly what I was expecting, though, like the process of how to quit things and when to do so, which is exactly what I would expect from Annie Duke. We read her other book, Thinking in Bets, and I feel like that was kind of an interesting read as well. So she's a pretty good writer, but Yeah, what were your first thoughts on this one, Mike? Do you have any preconceived notions that were completely dashed?
No, this one was kind of what I expected, but it was also really good. So, I have thoughts on the prologue if you want to go there, or
Yeah,
introduction, I guess.
sure, we can do that. Just to set that up quick, the prologue basically is talking about quitting versus grit, quit versus grit. And should you quit things, or are you quitting too soon? Should you really stick things out? That to me, that's really what that whole section's about. Tells a story about Muhammad Ali when he probably should have quit but didn't. There's that. Anyway, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, those stories, just as a side note, are some of the best storytelling that I can recall from a book. Like, I think she's a better storyteller than Ryan Holiday.
See, that's fascinating for you to bring up because I actually have, so right here by the prologue, I've got the story. This is in my handwritten notes, but I've got Muhammad Ali just as a note. And then beside it, I said, she's telling this about as good as Ryan Holiday. That's what my note says here. So, like, interesting. So it's interesting you say you think she might be even better. I will say, like, even the stories, they're not stories I've heard before. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not stories that I've heard before. It's almost the stories are almost unnecessary, I would argue, because she's such a good writer with the rest of it. Like, there's built-in story with her experience as a poker player, but she does a really good job weaving in these historical stories as well. So that definitely makes the book better. I'm not saying she shouldn't have done it. But the Muhammad Ali story at the very beginning, obviously very kind of emotional, uh, because it's highlighting the fact that because he didn't quit, he had physical bodily harm happen to him. And the underlying tone there is, don't do that. Quit before it has permanent lasting negative effects on your life. And then gets into the concept of grit versus quit, which I thought was fascinating. And that's the perfect setup, like the perfect framing for this, because grit is the thing that can make you stick with hard things that are worthwhile, but it can also make you stick with things that are no longer worthwhile. And she's saying you got to know, success is really knowing what are the right things to stick to, and then what are the right things to walk away from. Success is picking the right thing to stick to and quitting all the rest of them. And that's kind of challenging. Not like that is hard, although it is hard, but it's kind of confrontational. Like, it forces you to wrestle with some things, because I think the default, and kind of her point in the prologue, is that society exalts grit as a virtue. And it is in certain sense. If you pick the right thing to stick with, like, grit is the thing that can help you be successful with it. But that's one thing. And then there are how many other things that you're trying to do at the same time. And we just apply this concept of grit to all the other things that we really shouldn't be doing. And she talks about the framing of this is kind of weird, I thought, but the scales are gaffed towards grit instead of quit. I've never used that term gaff or heard that term gaffed before, but basically what that means is, like, the thumb is on the scale, right? If you've got grit and quit on these scales, there is more weight placed on grit. And I never really thought about it that way, but it's totally true, and it's a great setup for the rest of the book.
I know, like, in the tech space, people talk about, move fast and kill your darlings and drop features that are not helpful, minimum viable product, like all of that stuff is dependent on quitting things very quickly. And that's something that I think is not normal. And even in that tech space, I don't see that as something that is done on a large scale. Like, they'll do it when it comes to the product, but when it comes to the business, they don't necessarily do that. Like, they'll have entire departments that they'll keep around because of historical reasons when they really shouldn't do that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff around that. But I think you're absolutely right. And the way that she pitches this is that we tend to exalt those who will persevere through the depths of pain and suffering, or when it's really should have been dropped already. So I get that that's a thing that we tend to do, but when you look at a lot of very successful people, they've quit early on a lot of things. Think of I don't think this story was in here, but the Michael Jordan scenario where he quit, then came back and quit. Like you don't want that. It damages a reputation in the process. And learning when to persevere through something versus when to drop something, that's the key. And that's exactly what she's going to take us through throughout this book.
Yep.
Which will bring us to section 1. Now, I have this, there's, oh gosh, how many were there? There's 11 chapters in this book. No conclusion, which is interesting. We'll get to that. But there's 4 sections here. So she's not exactly going to follow the trend of 3 parts. But I feel like this would make more sense to talk about these in the section form instead of by chapter, number 1, because 11 chapters would take a long time to get through. And also, so much of like chapter 1, 2, and 3, which are all part of section 1, I felt like kind of blended together. So to me, it makes more sense to talk about it that way. So section 1, the case for quitting. This is basically laying the groundwork for why you should quit. The 3 chapters in here, the opposite of a great virtue is a great virtue, which is the quit versus grit concept. Quitting on time usually feels like quitting too early. The adage of if you're in management, when you need to fire somebody, as soon as it crosses your mind that maybe you should fire somebody, that adage in management, that's this concept. Should I stay or should I go? This is basically loss aversion, if you will. So like it's the scenario of when should you stick with something or when should you let it go. So again, it's still talking about that quit versus grit concept. This whole case for quitting, like she's got a lot of stories here where it really left me thinking, maybe I should quit things faster and move on to other things. But at the same time, it's like, but I have so much invested in XYZ, which is unfortunate because she'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, anyway, the case for quitting. We should quit things more often.
We should. This section was kind of validation for me.
I wondered. I thought about you a lot while reading this, to be honest. Like, okay, with you quitting your job, was this validation or did it make you think you quit too early? That was my main question. Or maybe it made you think you quit too late.
Well,
and you have hindsight right now, so makes it easier.
So I feel like this would have been helpful to read earlier. Before I actually read this, I did have the thought, should I not have left? Because this just in, starting your own company is hard.
What? I did not know that, Mike. Interesting.
Not a surprise, right? But I had a few things that I thought were going to materialize for some consulting stuff that did not materialize. And so it's been a little bit of a scramble. The Obsidian University launch went great, but that really needed to happen. And so like I'm head down working on that. And as soon as that gets done, it's like, well, what's the next thing? There doesn't appear to be any relief in sight. Now that's a fairly negative view, and that's not the picture I'm trying to paint here. I know it's going to take time to build these business systems, but part of me, I guess, was second guessing the way that it went down. Internally, when I made the decision, it was essentially because I was working with a friend of mine and I didn't feel right about not being all in with that thing. I think she probably would have advised me, Annie Duke, to build the thing on the side for like 6 months, kind of just show up, do the bare minimum, and then make the leap. But I couldn't uh, I just I couldn't do that. So I left, have all this work to do, and I did have the thought um, that maybe I made the wrong decision here. Uh, but then when she's talking about some of the specific problems that were happening, like you brought up, the right time to fire someone is the first time it crosses your mind. Like that specifically, I remember dealing with that in the day job, and like those types of discussions and the decisions that were made, and I'm not even really projecting that like that's the wrong decision because I was the new guy at the agency, but I do remember feeling friction, like why aren't we doing anything about this kind of
Yeah.
stuff? And that really grated on me. So I do think ultimately I did make the right decision, that I'm doing the thing that if I were to get to my deathbed and not have tried this, I will absolutely 100% regret it. So at least I'll know now. um, but yeah, so this at the beginning, she's essentially sharing all this stuff, and it was telling me that I probably did wait too long to make that decision. I feel like the signs were there, but I had a sunk cost in my head that I had made this decision. I was embracing this new thing and this new role as an integrator. I'm pretty good at this business operating system stuff. I was really good at finding all of this supporting evidence for like why I should stick it out. And I kept looking for things that were indications of maybe this will turn into the thing that I thought it was going to be. And eventually, like, I just had to tell myself, this is what it is, right? It's not good or bad necessarily. It's just not for me. And that was a really tough decision to come to. Um, and I do feel after reading this first section though that it was, like I said, confirmation that I did make the right choice, even if it took me a little longer maybe than it should have.
There's a story in here. The chapter about quitting on time usually feels like quitting too early. There's a story about Stuart Butterfield in here who developed
Yep.
a game, video game. People probably remember it, Glitch. And it's an interesting story because in it, Glitch is growing, but only because they're spending so much money to acquire new customers for their subscription to the game. And as a result of that, they sold off, or they didn't sell it off, but they quit making the game early, even though they were still growing at the time. But Stewart realized that they were spending a lot of money to acquire new people, and the churn rate was really high. And eventually, they were going to run out of people to go through that could potentially try the game, and they were going to run out of people very quickly. So he quit early, returned the money back to investors that hadn't been spent, but saved one feature from the game that people really loved, which became a feature that eventually became Flickr. So if you know the photo sharing tool, that became Flickr. And then they eventually developed, I think it was it as part of Flickr, or was it part of the Glitch system? But he's the one that, through that development team, came up with Glitch, or not Glitch, Slack. So Slack came out of all of that. And
yeah, they went from Glitch to Flickr, back to Glitch, and then
that's what it was.
Slack.
Yep. So because of all of that, basically the moral of the story there is that Stewart was able to look forward and look at things objectively instead of getting caught up in the moment, and realize when he needed to get out of something, and took the whole company with him. But because he was returning money to investors in the process, and because he was able to do that, everybody left in much better situations than they would have been had they just stuck with it. So quitting felt like they were quitting too early, but it turned out it was exactly the right timing. But I feel like that's really hard to do. Like trying to see past where you're at right now and look at it holistically and be able to see that you need to quit. I feel like that's not an easy thing, and obviously she's going to spell that out through the rest of this book, through these stories. The number of times that, like, the ones that get me are these stories when it's like this person was someone who studied loss aversion, and because they studied all that, they still had this scenario over in this other situation where they did the exact same thing that they studied for their entire career. So this is not a simple thing to just overlook. Like, there is no magic bullet here to just like, here's how you get yourself perspective and make the right decisions. Like, no, this is hard even if you know exactly what you're looking for. That was at least refreshing to me and made me feel better about myself. I just need to say that.
Yeah, well, that story, I love that story. I had not heard that story before, and I definitely related to that story because when I left my position as the integrator, I think a lot of people there thought I was crazy because the results looked good. There was the growth and the profit, which was the measuring stick for success in my position. So, like, if you look at, is Mike doing a good job? The answer is yes. The company is doing well. Why would you leave at that point? And I couldn't really articulate it other than kind of want to do this other thing. Uh, and we tend to rationalize away the clues that point us towards quitting is something that she says in this second chapter. People are excessively cautious with facing life-changing decisions. I feel that is me too. So for a long time, I not a long time, but probably several months was questioning things, and that was kind of the, if I look back in retrospect, that is like the seeds of this, wrong fit sort of thing. But I didn't have any solid numbers to latch onto, so I had trouble making the decision. All the numbers that I was looking at were, you should just stick with the thing. But yeah, this is a great section. I mean, if this is where the book ended, I got my money's worth.
I know. Actually, I don't say this very often. I don't know that I've ever said this, but reading the prologue, like, this is, if I ever go to a bookstore, this is the type of thing that people do, is you read the prologues or read the introductions or at least skim those, and then that is a really good way to figure out, does the premise of this book fit what you're looking for? And that's something I do quite a bit. If you read the prologue to this, I feel like you learn that, like, we talk about this, like, if I get one tidbit out of this book, it was worth buying and reading. That happened in the prologue for me.
Yeah.
So I haven't even achieved the beginning of the book, and yet I've already succeeded in the purpose of me picking up this book to begin with. So that is something that I think tells maybe some of the density of this book too. We've talked about that as well. How much information is in this book for the number of words that you're going to read in this book, and there's a lot in this. Like, there is a lot to go through. Which means we need to keep moving or we're not going to get through this. So section 2, In the Losses, is the name of this. There's starts in chapter 4. There's 3 chapters in this particular section. Escalating Commitment, Sunk Cost and the Fear of Waste, Monkeys and Pedestals. And let me kind of summarize these 3 here real quick. So escalating commitment, the more you invest in something, the more you feel like you can't leave it. You think of the number of, like, I always think of like government projects where they sunk $1 billion into it, and then it's not quite done, so they sink another 500 million into it, and then they sink another 500 million into it, and then they can't let the $2 billion project go because they don't want to show that they're misusing taxpayer dollars. So then they sink another, and then it just keeps going. And does it ever end? And then by the time it's all done, you realize that you never should have started it. If you knew it was going to cost $4 billion to build it, nobody would have approved it, and yet that's exactly what they've done. Anyway,
I mean, $4 billion is cheap compared to the California bullet train.
Yes. Yeah. Chapter 5, Sunk Cost and the Fear of Waste. This is something I know people really struggle with. I know I have as well. Monkeys and Pedestals. This one's kind of interesting. That comes from the term of, let's see if I can get this right. So if you had a monkey, what was the thing? If you had a monkey that could juggle,
you're trying to train a monkey to juggle flaming torches.
That's what it was. While standing on a pedestal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Juggle flaming torches while standing on a pedestal. And the thing here is that there's two parts to that. One is training the monkey to juggle flaming items while teaching him to juggle that. And the other is building the pedestal. Well, building the pedestal is easy, but training the monkey is the hard part. And the idea is that you need to start with training the monkey. Don't start with building the pedestal, because that's easy. And once this was explained, I was like, holy buckets, I struggled with this on so many fronts. I will build the back end for things 100 times before I build the front end of things. And building the back end is the easy part. Building the front end is the hard part for the things I'm referring to. And that means I'm building the pedestal with the preconceived notion that I'm making a lot of progress on something, when in reality, I'm not. I'm not accomplishing the hard part of that. So anyway,
ridiculous picture, but it's so effective.
I will never forget that. It's just embedded in my brain. Anyway, these 3 chapters are fascinating. I think this is probably this might be my favorite section in the book, partially because of this. The escalating commitment piece is the one that I think really, really struck me. But again, the monkeys and pedestals thing was a visual that's amazing.
Yeah, there's a real effective breakdown here of the 3 different components with the escalating commitment, which is the strict adherence to a losing strategy that causes us to double down on things. And it doesn't just happen in high stakes scenarios. That's the big takeaway for me from that section. For example, when you start a bad movie, you feel like you need to finish it.
Or a bad book.
I was gonna say I'll apply that to books too. With the exception of the stuff that we do for Bookworm, obviously we have to follow through with it. But for the average person, don't continue to read something if you're not getting anything out of it. By the way, on that topic, this is a bit of a tangent, but I feel like this is important. There's this concept of speed reading, which I have trouble with. Just actually, okay, I'm gonna click into speed reading and crank through books really fast. I know that it's possible, though. I actually took a course on it a while back. And the big takeaway from that course for me was not you click over into speed reading, but that you are using different speeds when you read. You have a shifter, and there are sections of books when you just gotta go down into first gear and take your time with this because this feels important. But there are other parts, especially in bad books, where it's let's just get through this quickly, and you're kind of skimming things. And I feel like that is a totally valid approach. So before you actually bail on a book, I would say don't feel like you really need to internalize every word that's on every page. Maybe move a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Maybe it picks up, so. But the sunk cost and the fear of waste, this is the California bullet train story. And I don't remember the exact numbers here, but originally it was estimated to be done in 2020. And I think it was going to cost $15 billion. But the hard part here was they were going to have to go through some mountains and some tricky terrains. And they just kept upping the estimates like you were talking about, but it wasn't 2x. It's now over 105 billion, and they're projecting it'll be done by 2035. And they've only built a couple small sections of the track, which were pedestal building. They were the easy parts. There, we started it, see? But they have no idea how they're gonna actually tackle the hard parts.
Yeah, they had the issuance of $9 billion in bonds, but that wasn't the estimated cost. The estimated cost was $33 billion in total, is what they had estimated at the very beginning.
Okay. Yeah, so still significantly higher, and they haven't even considered the monkey yet.
Yeah, the current estimate is 105 billion. So
that's the one I remember. And then they also made the point that with some of those projects, it's really hard to quit because those are politically motivated. And if you bail on a project like that, essentially what you're saying is this project was a waste. And no one wants to waste taxpayer money. So her point is like you keep doubling down on these things and the cost keeps going up, and most of them aren't going to see the light of day anyways. So the real wasteful thing is to continue to do this, but that's not the way it comes off. That's not the optics of the situation. So it's hard to do. There's also a concept here in chapter 5 of the katamari, which is this like thing that keeps rolling over, and every time it rolls over, it picks up everything that it touches.
This was a video game. That's how it started. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's easy to see. I like that visual too, where it's easy to see how this thing can very quickly, exponentially explode. Sunk cost, I like a katamari she talks about. But yeah, the monkey in the pedestal thing is the big takeaway, I think, from me. Because pedestal building, she says, gives you the illusion of progress. Absolutely. And that's something I've been thinking a lot about as I'm building out the business systems. What of this is actually effective, and what of it is just there? I did something. I've got a whole big list of things that I want to build, and I'm forcing myself to tackle the most important ones. Because you look at that list, it's easy to get overwhelmed. And well, I'll just pick one near the bottom so I can say I did something. That's pedestal building. That was kind of a moment of clarity that I had from my my personal retreat. By the way, I went on a personal retreat this week, and I went to this thing called a getaway house. Have you heard of these?
I've heard of some things around this. Like it's a place you can go to. It's fairly small, and it's like all yours for whatever time period, right?
I'll share the link in the chat here, but it's like a tiny house on a campsite.
Okay.
Michael Porter told me about these, and they're awesome. They're kind of positioned as like a way for big city people to get out into nature, like get away, right? But the one from Milwaukee is actually nowhere near Milwaukee and is only 40 minutes from my house.
Okay.
So I went to one this week, and they're pretty cool. So yeah, a little bit of a tangent there, but that's kind of where I got this moment of clarity. That's actually where I read the section about the monkeys and the pedestals, and I was like, oh, man, I've been building pedestals. I gotta train the monkey.
Yeah, that one's gonna stick with me because I've realized that I build a lot of pedestals, and I don't think I realized that that's what I was doing. It's like, oh, well, this is something that has to get done. Like, I need to build the payment structure for this product that I'm in the middle of building. Well, I go working on that, and then I realize, wait, I'm not actually building the product. I feel like I'm getting things done, but I'm not, because I'm working on the back, like the administrative side of it.
Exactly.
I'm not actually working on the real thing. So, like I mentioned earlier, I got a tidbit from the prologue. Obviously, there was a lot in section 1 about why I should quit, and then in this, just like, it just keeps piling on. It's like, hey, don't build pedestals, train monkeys.
And the thing about this is, like, all those other things that you're talking about, those have to get done, right?
Yes.
So it's easy to justify, well, I got to do these things anyways. I may as well do them now. It kind of gets back into like back in the day with OmniFocus 2, everyone had their custom perspectives and low energy, all that kind of stuff. And my big takeaway from this is like, that's the wrong approach. Not that you shouldn't use metadata and contexts and things like that, but anything that is not training the monkey is building a pedestal. There is one monkey to be trained at any given time.
Early on, I don't remember if this was before, I think it was before we started recording, but I was talking about using Apple reminders and like the built-in calendar app and stuff. And instead of like all the fancy tools and stuff that can do a lot of things, I think this is partly why, because it's a lot easier to just do a list of projects, say in reminders. And I know that that breaks with like GTD convention, right? I'm not actually breaking it down to tasks, it's projects. That's fine. I know from looking at that project name what the next thing is. So why would I take the time of building out the pedestal of detailing all those pieces out when I already know all of it just from a glance? I might as well just look at that and be able to intuitively know, I've got a list of 12 projects here. What needs to happen next? I can make that judgment call instantly. I don't need to spend the hour of building the pedestal with all the specific items in there. Jose has a good point in the chat. Like, pedestal building is just the default mode. Yep. I think that's because when people start something new, pedestal building is easy, and it is a fast way to feel like you have progress. It's not putting you in the difficult side of trying to do the monkey training and trying to do the stuff that's actually going to propel it forward. That's the hard stuff, and that's the stuff that we tend to wait on. It's like, oh, we'll figure that out. We got to have this structure, that way when we have that built, it has something to stand on. But it's backwards. Okay.
Yep.
Monkeys and pedestals. One last note here before we go to section 3. Towards the end of that monkeys and pedestals chapter, there's a comment. It's kind of a short period, actually, where she talks about kill criteria.
Yeah.
And I wrote down that that's similar to anti-goals. Basically, putting together the criteria. When you're training your monkey, you need to have this criteria that at some point, if something is not possible, if that monkey doesn't have the ability to even hold a torch, then training it to juggle is not going to happen. So you need to kill that task, that project. Like, that concept of having the criteria that if this happens, this is when we stop working towards this project goal. That, I think, is super powerful. I don't really know what that means for as far as like day-to-day practice, but it's at least a concept that I think could be very helpful. Like, when should this project be shot and put to bed and not continue down the path that we're going down? So anyway, I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, another way to describe that is kind of a pre-mortem.
Yeah.
She talks about. But yeah, the best quitting criteria she mentions contain 2 things: a state and a date. And I don't have an action item associated with that, but I totally could.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really good advice. I don't have any kill criteria associated with the projects that I'm working on. And I don't necessarily want to with the things that I'm currently doing. Like, I keep bringing up City University because that's the thing that I'm focused on, but I kind of know what the path forward looks like for that. I kind of know what that should ultimately look like. And the same thing with like the life theme cohort and stuff like that. There are lots of other things that I've kind of dabbled with a little bit here and there. And I've kind of got some clarity at the moment on the path forward. But I can totally see a scenario where future Mike is like, okay, I got to figure out the next thing. Right. And being in that same place that I was even like 4 or 5 weeks ago and having that approach about a thing, I could totally see myself identifying some kill criteria as I'm figuring out, okay, what am I going to do with this project? So I'll use it in the future, but not right now.
Yeah. There's a lot of things like that through this book. I keep thinking like escalating commitment and monkeys and pedestals and should I stay or should I go? Like, as I read through these chapter titles and think through the concepts behind them, it's like, I don't really like, I didn't write down any action items from this book. Just a spoiler alert.
I didn't either.
And it's interesting because this is a lot of like, this is how you think. It's not a here, go grab a piece of paper and do this thing. Like, it's not like your cohorts where like, these are the things you need to do by this date. Have this and share it there. Okay. Well, I can do that. This doesn't have anything like that. So it means you're interpreting to get there. And maybe that would happen. In my case, it didn't. Let's go on to section 3, because this will be difficult to work through. Identity and other impediments. Chapter 7, 8, and 9 here. You own what you've bought and what you've thought. Endowment and status quo bias. Chapter 8, the hardest thing to quit is who you are. Identity and dissonance. Chapter 9, find someone who loves you but doesn't care about feelings. And these are kind of what you would expect. Chapter 7, you own what you've bought, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, it's we prefer to stick with the status quo. And we will have a tendency to like what we currently have as opposed to getting rid of it. Like there's a Dave Ramsey thing he tends to do. Is like, okay, if you have your house and you have purchased a second house, like people talk about buying a second house and keeping their first house and just renting it out. Well, if like that's a way of like keeping your house because you already have it. You have the status quo of I've owned this house and you're adding to that. Well, his question is always, if you didn't own the house, would you take out the mortgage and buy it so that you could rent it? Most of the time the answer is no. He's like, well, then why would you keep the house? Like that's the concept here with this particular one. The second one here, the hardest thing to quit is who you are. There's a story in here about how what was it? Sears was a retail store, and then they got into financial stuff, and then really what happened is the financial stuff that they had bought and then later sold ended up being very successful, and they probably should have kept it and sold the retail side, but because retail was who Sears was, it led them to bankruptcy because they wouldn't let go of who they were and rebrand themselves. So that is something that you need to be aware of. You can get your head wrapped up in things too tight. Find someone who loves you but doesn't care about feelings. Really, it's a way of like trying to get outside opinions. That's the way that I took that. Like finding people or organizations that are willing to give you a third party view on something, so that way you're not so wrapped up in your own thoughts and feelings about something. So when you start to identify with a product or a company, or like, this is my baby, I don't want to see it go, like that's when you're starting to have problems. Don't do that, Mike. So if you have your business, if it starts to go south, be willing to let it go. That's the key here.
Yeah, let's go back to the Sears thing real quick, because Sears wasn't just successful with the financial stuff. As Jose points out in the chat, there's a whole bunch of companies that they owned that are still around that are very successful, like Allstate, Discover, Coldwell Banker. And when they sold them off, there was a quote she used in the book that really kind of hit hard. It was because it was in quotes, and it was, they sold off the successful financial stuff to, quote, get back to our retailing roots, unquote. And I feel like I've heard that statement a bunch of times. I probably even used that occasionally. It's like, well, this is who we are. Well, who you are is a failing business. It caused them to be completely blind to the success that they had. Like, those are insanely successful companies.
Yeah. And they're all still around.
They're all still around. I forget. I think Discover was, or Allstate maybe was like the biggest one, and it was worth like $40 billion. And I forget the exact numbers, but that may be bigger than what Sears was. And it's not the same because Sears has been around for a really long time. And so 1920s dollars, obviously way different than 2020s dollars. But just not recognizing the potential of what they had because they were so attached to, this is who we are. And I get why that happens. The term for that is cognitive dissonance, right? When new information conflicts with our previously held beliefs. This is why I'm really grateful for having read books like Liminal Thinking, because I feel like that book specifically challenged me to look for the arguments and the ideas that are contrary to what I hold to be true. And well, some people may think that is threatening to convictions and beliefs. It's actually had the opposite effect for me. Like, it's made my convictions and my beliefs stronger because I've considered more information, and that's still what I consider to be the right thing. Now, it's easy for people to look from the outside with their own biases and be like, well, you're not seeing it right. And you can't really judge that for somebody else. You got to arrive at your own conclusions. But I am thankful that we've been pushed in that direction, to not just surround ourselves with the people who think and talk exactly like we do and enforce that bubble of belief. Because I feel like that bubble of belief is the thing that can amplify that cognitive dissonance. Like, if you're in that bubble belief and you get one thing that kind of floats in that's contrary, you really have issues with that one thing, because everything in your world is perfectly organized and this one thing doesn't fit. It's uncomfortable and it's inconvenient. What do you do with this? But when you're constantly uncomfortable because of inconvenient information that you have to figure out what to make sense of, like, that's a skill and a practice. And just like going to the gym, I believe that those muscles can get stronger and it's less threatening every time that happens. That's kind of the whole idea behind chapter 9, find someone who loves you but doesn't care about hurt feelings. She's basically telling us to get a quitting coach, somebody who can tell you when it's time to let things go. I don't have an action item associated with this, but I like that idea of the quitting coach. I think the application of this for me is really just have people who are speaking in your life who are going to tell you the truth and are going to help you see things right. For me, that's mastermind group. But I do think this is really important. Have people in your life who can tell you this sort of stuff. But I'm not gonna go hire somebody just to fill that role. I feel like I kind of sort of have that filled already, but I feel like this is an obvious action item if someone does not have this already. Who in your life has permission and is able to speak truth so that you can see things right and tell you when it's time to give up on this idea that you have, regardless of how much investment you've made into it or how attached you are to it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I don't think that's easy to accomplish either. Like finding the people who are able to give you that feedback in a way that doesn't completely force you to reject them is important. But at the same time, like when you have a strong conviction and you're confronted with evidence that that conviction is wrong, how you process that can, I don't want to say dictate, but it can be a strong indicator of the character that you have and how deep down that hole you may have been. Deep down the hole is probably the wrong phrase to use because if it's a positive thing, then that's something you should hold on to. The thing I instantly think about, if you've ever looked up people doing flat earth experiments online and the look on their face when they do the experiment and the experiment confirms that the earth is round. I went through a phase where I thought these were hilarious. And the look on these people's faces when they confirm that the earth is round through their experiment to prove that the earth is flat is priceless. And usually there's a look of devastation because everything that they have been teaching and preaching for the last however long in that particular person's case, sometimes people it's years, they have just proven that that entire world of thinking is wrong. And they were certain that it was 100% true. Now, that's a weird example because I don't know how people get on board with that particular theory, but that is what they do. But that's a good way to see that when you have something that you've held on to very deeply and you're confronted with the hard facts that what you have believed is wrong, what do you do with it? That's where your real values start to show. All right, let's go on to section 4 here because this is fun. Opportunity cost is section 4. This is the last section. Again, there's no conclusion, so this is the wrap-up of the book, chapters 10 and 11. Chapter 10 is lessons from forced quitting. Chapter 11 is the myopia of goals. Chapter 10, basically, when you're forced to quit something, it then forces you to explore new things. And when you start to explore those, you get to see new opportunities that you may want to explore. The key is to maybe learn how to explore those things before you're forced to quit. And the story that is spelled out here that I thought was the most interesting, I think it's closer to the end of the chapter, was the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and how so many people were forced to go work from home. And then when they were asked to come back to the office, there was the great resignation where people quit month after month, and people were like, nope, done, not going back to the office. Nope. And the theory here is that it's possible that whenever people were forced to stay at home and work, they started to realize what these new opportunities were for achieving an income. So then they were able to explore those opportunities and pursue them in more depth. The myopia of goals is also, I kind of wonder, I want your opinion on this chapter too. The thought that when you have goals, it can give you something to drive towards, but it can also be the exact thing that drives it to failure, because you may not want to give up on that goal, even though there's, in some cases, physical pain or hardship that's happening as a part of trying to achieve that goal. The story there was, well, there's a handful of stories, but of people running a marathon, and they will run through pain to injury. I think we know somebody who's done this.
Does that
for the sake of achieving a goal when they should have stopped to prevent the longer term trauma from happening. I mean, I don't know anybody who would have ever done that. I don't think we know that at all.
Man, I mean, so the last chapter in this book being a chapter about the bad parts of goals. I mean, yes, obviously I like that.
Yes.
She starts that chapter with the stories about people who like broke their legs because they were committed to running these marathons, and they did it even with a broken leg. That sounds extreme, but like you've been alluding to, I have my own version of that. I apologize to everybody who has heard this story before, but I will
and I
tell it again.
apologize for bringing it up.
No, this is the place to tell it, and it's been a while. We've got quite a few new listeners, but a long time ago, I decided I was going to run a half marathon as like the ultimate test of mind over matter, because I grew up playing sports and I would do anything that involved a ball, but hated running. I thought that was stupid and pointless. As I got older, thought, I'll challenge myself. If I can train myself to discipline myself to train for a half marathon and actually run it, like that would be a pretty impressive mental accomplishment. So I did that. It took me a year and a half to train. I overtrained. I made a rookie mistake and just was running, wasn't cross training. And the week before the race, my patella tendon slipped off my kneecap onto the side of my leg. So not a broken leg, very minor compared to the stories that she tells in here, but obviously it resonated with me because I went through a similar thing. I was a week out from my race, and I'm gonna run this anyways. I've trained so hard, I've had this goal, so I did it. I finished the race, and I remember distinctly crossing the finish line, because when you cross the finish line, you go through this chute. They give you water, banana. Usually, there's somebody there. If there's like medals, they'll give you your medal. So by the time you're out of the chute, there's people there who are watching you. They're usually at the finish line. Hey, great job, But I was there by myself, and I remember like walking through that, and just like looking around, seeing like other people who are celebrating with their loved ones, and I'm like, now what do I do? There was this vacuum because I was attached to this goal, trained a year and a half for it, and then literally the moment I crossed the finish line, it's like, well, this sucks. Now what? So, problem there being, I had this goal, right? And the obvious thing to do would be set another goal, another race. I couldn't do that. I had physical therapy I had to do. And the lesson I learned, actually Atomic Habits helped a ton with this, was to learn to love the process and not be associated with the outcome. So I had to go through physical therapy for 6 weeks, and then I started running again, and I upped my distance too fast, had to deal with plantar fasciitis and had to take another break. That was really frustrating. When I got to run again, finally, I forced myself to go slow, and learned to just enjoy the process. I wasn't concerned about the distance. I wasn't concerned about the times. It was just kind of a meditative thing. Now going for a run is just something I enjoy doing, and that's usually when I get all my good ideas is when I'm out on a run. I'm not fast. I'm not going to win, right? The last time I ran a race in May, I did the same half marathon, came back. Malachi is like, "Did you win?" I'm like, "No, I wasn't even in the top half." There were 1,000 people there. 500 of them beat me. I got passed by a 70-year-old grandma. But it's not about that anymore, because it's not about the goal. So she articulates probably way better than I ever could the problem with goals. She says you either reach a finish line or you don't. And I would say it a little bit differently just because I'm a nerd. And I would say that goals have a binary state. So it's an I or an O.
It's right. Pass fail. Yeah.
Pass fail. Exactly. And she mentions that these finish lines are often arbitrary. So we got to be careful when we set these goals. Again, she's kind of alluding to the fact that goals can be good. And I agree with that. They can create motivation. But again, like, grit causes you to stick with things, but also the bad part is it causes you to stick with things. So you constantly have to be asking yourself, is this the right thing to be sticking with? The personal retreat process that I do, basically the 12-week year stuff, helps a lot this, because I don't go 18 months with a goal anymore. I go 3 months, and then I reevaluate. I do the wheel of life. I do the retrospective stuff. I ask myself, what should I start doing, stop doing, keep doing? And I pick something different. It's usually in a domain that is totally unrelated. So I don't get so fixated on this is the thing for so long. I feel like the distance with the feedback loops is important here. And really, we just need to recognize that goals do cause this escalation of commitment. And when we give up on a goal, we will feel like we have failed or we have wasted our time and our effort. But there's a very important point that she makes in this last chapter, that waste is a forward-looking problem, not a backward-looking problem. So when she framed it that way, that made a ton of sense to me, because when you do feel like you failed something, you feel like all of the effort that you put forth towards that thing was wasted because you didn't get to that finish line. But that is obviously not the approach of a true retrospective. A true retrospective forces you to look backwards, right? And so that's kind of an interesting challenge, separating those two. How do you look backwards and disconnect it from looking forwards at the same time? And it just kind of reiterated for me the value of the personal retreat process that I accidentally landed on. Like, I've been doing this for a long time, and I didn't realize the real value I was getting from it when I first started doing it. But after reading this chapter, this is the way.
It makes sense, right? That's at the end of every chapter, she has a summary. It's basically like all the big points from the chapter. And this particular one, it looks like it's a 9-point list on this particular chapter, chapter 11, the myopia of goals. And it's almost like a checklist for why we've talked about goals being less than ideal. And like we were talking about, they escalate commitment when you should quit. They're pass fail in nature. You shouldn't measure just when you hit the goal, but also what you've learned along the way. You should set intermediate goals and, set the kill criteria. All of these things, they're inflexible in a flexible world. Like, these are all things she has in this. Like, oh, well, check. These are all the reasons we don't like goals. So it's a really good summary of that. But again, she pitches it through the lens of stories and people who should have quit, who didn't, and the results of that. The part that's interesting to me is that she ends this chapter. I feel like she spent a lot of time putting this book together. I don't want to get into style and writing too much, but not yet anyway. But she uses this last chapter to wrap up the book anyway. So it's almost like it doesn't need a conclusion. because the way that she ends of that chapter is just with the statement, contrary to popular belief, winners quit a lot. That's how they win, which is the summarization of both the chapter and the section, but also the book itself. So she did a really good job with that. Anyway.
Yeah, one other thing with that, by the way, is she mentions that we need to celebrate our progress. It's kind of a minor point that she makes, but I feel like it's really important. I feel like she actually could have gone deeper on that part of it. Because when you are considering whether you should quit something and you're thinking about all that time that you have wasted, what you are firmly looking at is the gap, right? But if you learn to celebrate your progress, you can look at the gain and you can glean some positive from the experience. Well, I didn't achieve the goal, but I learned how to do X, right? And I feel like that would make quitting a lot easier if you learn to recognize the gap in the gain.
Well, should we do action items?
Let's do it.
I have none. Okay, done. How about you?
I don't have any official action items. I feel like there will be lots of things in the future that will come from having read this. So I guess I share that because I don't think there are any action items right now, but there will definitely be future action items associated with this. It's kind of not the typical approach that we take for Bookworm. But I think it's not fair to the book itself just to say, nope, we have no action items from this based on what we've done in the previous 173 episodes. I feel like there is action that will be incentivized by reading this.
Yeah.
Just not immediately.
I just don't know what it is. As I was thinking about, like, what do I want to do as a result of having read this? Like, it's more I want to consider things in a different light whenever I'm making decisions, or maybe I need to reevaluate what I'm currently doing through this lens. But I don't really have I don't have anything more than that. So I mean, like, there's not a physical thing for me to put down.
Yep.
Which makes it a challenge. Okay. Well, let's move on to style and rating because that's way more fun in this case. Annie is an amazing storyteller. Like, we talk about people who are good at telling stories, but she is up there with the best of them. As we talked about earlier, she's probably in the same category as Ryan Holiday, which is an interesting thing to say. This is one that I really enjoyed reading. It's one that I oftentimes I will read the whole book, and then when I'm putting together the outline, I will end up skimming my way back through it just to find the points both in my notes and in the book that I want to talk about as part of the episode. The trick is, like, the stories are so gripping that I found myself, like, accidentally rereading things the second time I was glancing through it, which is not something I do very often, but it's just that gripping. It's like, wait, that story, there was a detail in that. It's like, what was that? And then I end up reading the 3 pages there. It's like, oh, okay, well, I wasn't planning on spending 30 minutes doing this, but here we are. So it's an awesome read in that sense. She has, even between the sections, there's a story that, like, transitions you from one section to the next, which is also odd, but that's what makes me think she spent a lot of time putting this together, and one that makes me really appreciate the work that she's put into this. As far as a rating, to me, this is a fairly simple 5.0 to me. I absolutely love this. I feel like this could easily help you understand when you should keep doing something or when you should let it go. And she absolutely nailed it, in my opinion. So I love the story. I love the way she formatted it. I love the topic. I love the lessons that come out of it. So to me, I feel like you should pick this up. Like, I don't really know anybody that I wouldn't recommend this one to, just because everybody is prone to loss aversion or sunk cost fallacy or the myopia of goals. Like, there's so many of these things that everybody deals with that I think you should pick this up and read it. No exceptions. If you haven't done it already, you need to go buy it. That's my opinion. Also, use the link in the show notes because it's affiliate link. That's the way to do it.
Yep.
That's my thoughts.
Helps support the show. Cool. Well, I'll agree with everything you just said about everyone should read this. I think it's a pretty eye-opening book. I think it's even better than Thinking in Bets. I'm struggling whether I want to rate it 5.0. I feel like the one nitpick I have with this is the sections feel a little bit disjointed. The chapters do not. The chapters are very well written, but the way that they're packaged, with the exception of section 1, feels a little bit weird. Section 1 seemed obvious. In the losses kind of makes sense too, but section 3, identity and other impediments, I feel like that kind of fits with the losses section. And then part 4, opportunity cost, that is an idea that she brings up back in section 2. Or no, sorry, the sunk cost was the thing. So opportunity cost is a little bit different there, but they are there's a lot of related things I feel like that are kind of stacked on top of each other. And from a story perspective and from a progressing through the chapters perspective, it's really well done because she'll reference other stories that she's shared as she goes. But just looking at the mind map, right, and the different colored nodes, I look at these sections and it's not as clean as some of the other books that we've read. This is a really minor nitpick. But since we're talking about style and rating, this is the place to do it. I love the ending with the myopia of goals. That is absolutely the perfect place for that chapter. I actually kind of like the fact that there is no conclusion. I think probably you could make the argument that there should be, because the result of not having a conclusion is you've just presented all this information and now it's like, here you go, just do something with it. Which is a lot. And I was able to do it. As I mentioned, I feel like I kind of read this book a few months later than I ideally would have, but it's still pretty clear for me, like there's some things I'm noodling on here. I do think there is a missed opportunity though to, okay, so I've just taught you all this about quitting. Now here are the ways to implement this tomorrow without just quitting your job like she talked about in chapter 2. And I feel like that's really the path forward for people with this. This is not something that is the default. Culture kind of enforces grit over quit. So it would have been nice to talk about practically, here's how you can start building your quit muscle. Like even in the chat, Martin mentioned quit social media. Like you could make a statement like that as an example of something someone might want to quit. And you could totally use the sunk cost, opportunity cost, like all the things that she's talked about. Like you could tie it into some of that stuff. I feel like that's kind of missing. It really doesn't detract from the value of the book all that much. I don't think. I really enjoyed this one, but I think I am going to rate it at 4.5. I don't know. Could I pick 4.75? Maybe we should change to a 10-point scale.
No, people already want us to not do the 0.5 stuff. So
yeah, I know. It is really, really good. I'm not sure about double 5-star book having no action items. That's the other thing that is bouncing around in my brain. But like I said, I feel like there will be, and the principles in here I've kind of already acted on. So maybe it would have been 5 stars for me had I read it in January. But I will again echo the fact that I think everyone should pick this one up. Annie Duke is a phenomenal writer, phenomenal storyteller. I don't remember the stories being that good in Thinking in Bets. Maybe they were, but I was a little bit surprised by the quality of the storytelling, to tell you the truth. But yeah, like I said, I think she's a better storyteller than Ryan Holiday. So I love the chapter summaries as well, by the way. There's like these bullet points of what she covered as like the main points in the chapters. So it's got a great reference if you wanted to go back and kind of revisit after you've got some distance from this one.
All right, let's put it on the shelf. What's next, Mike?
Next is a Kevin Kelly book, Excellent Advice for Living. Have you looked at this one yet?
I have not. My goal is to pick it up tonight when the kids go to bed. Should I be afraid?
No, we're gonna have to get creative with the format for this one, I think.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a whole bunch of short little excerpts, kind of like what's that one we just read that you picked? The things you can only see when you slow down, something like that. It's basically like a whole bunch of those anecdotes, but it's Kevin Kelly. So they're good. I just opened to a random page yesterday, and one of them was never ask a woman if she's pregnant, let her tell you. So that's the kind of stuff. There's no chapters. We're just gonna have to like rapid fire like the things that kind of jumped out to us and talk about anecdotes and stories that go along with that. But I think this will be a fun one.
Side note, this is third hand. I have a friend who has a friend who his way of greeting anyone he's anywhere remotely close to who's female, he will ask them if they're pregnant, but he asks everybody all the time, every time he sees them. So that way it's an easy door for them to say yes, if that's true. I think it just seems like the sort of thing you should not do. Like, it just seems like a bad idea, but that's what he does. Yeah. Theoretically. I don't know. I'm hearing that third hand, giving that to you third hand. So Excellent Advice for Living. And then after that, I noticed Blake had recommended this, and it was on my list of things to cover here as well. This just came out like a month and a half ago or so. But The Art of Clear Thinking. This is by Hassard Lee. A stealth fighter pilot's timeless rules for making tough decisions. And I'm fascinated by this for a whole bunch of reasons, which I'll probably wait till the episode to bring up. But anyway, it sounds interesting to me.
Not the art of thinking clearly.
Correct, which is going to be very fun whenever people try to search for this in the Bookworm archives. Yes, you are 100% correct.
I already feel like this should have had a different title.
I know. It's rated very well, though, which is interesting to me. It's a bestseller as well. But anyway, there's that. How about Gap books, Mike? I'm sure you have like 4. You haven't had anything going on in your life.
I've got a stack of Gap books, but I haven't had a chance to read any of them. I'm not committing to one on air. What about you?
I'm the same. Yeah, I almost didn't get through this last one, and it's just because summer happened. Busy stuff outside. I want to go. The thing is, I don't want to sit in the house and read. I want to go outside and do stuff. That's where I'm at right now. So I go outside and do stuff. That's what I'm doing. That said, for those of you who have been amazing and joined us on a Saturday morning, though it sounds like Martin put us up on the big screen in his house. I don't know how we look in HD, but there you go. But anyway, if you're joining us live or you want to join us live, that's always a fun thing. It's fun to see people in the chat. Always cool to see your comments and refer to those as we go through the episode. But there's also the Bookworm Club, which is on Circle, that you can find at club.bookworm.fm, where you can make recommendations so that I'm not picking things on the fly in the middle of an episode while Mike's talking. And it makes life a little bit easier for us to choose books that are of interest to all of you. So if you want, go to the club. You can make those recommendations there, but you can also support the show monetarily and help us keep the lights on. But you also get some cool perks like a bootleg episode, which I will post to the feed as soon as we're done recording here. It's unedited, raw, all the pre and post talk and chatter, etc., etc. Very fun. No promises on quality. There's that. There's also the pro feed, which gets you the episode without all the ads and such in it. So has some perks to it. Also, all of Mike's MindNode files, all the fun stuff. So if you want to do that, go to bookworm.fm/membership, and that will take you through all the right steps from there. It's also, what is it? It's bookworm.fm/pro. That'll also get you there. I should probably start saying that because it's easier. Bookworm.fm/pro. There you go. They all take you to the same place. It's the way to do it. So anyway, thanks to those of you who are pro members.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today. If you are reading along, pick up Excellent Advice for Living by Kevin Kelly, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Boom. Job.
Made it.
Oh. All right.
That was a fun one.
It was a fun one.
Thanks for picking it.
An OODA loop. What is an OODA loop?
Oh, I know this. Something decision action. I just don't know it on Saturday morning.
Somebody needs to answer that question before I can't process anymore.
I'm waiting for Blake to jump in there.
Blake, come on, dude. There's not that long of a delay. I suppose it has to get to you, and then you have to recall it, and then you have to type it.
Observe, orient, decide, act.
There you go. There just needs to be like an UDAR with an R for like review or something. Or just, there's one of those circles where it goes back to observe. I could see that too. All right, you got to send me the link for your life theme review. You're trying to type on.
Review, you mean the email thing?
Yes, testimonial. Okay.
Oh, right.
I'm not giving you any grace, Blake. You need to get this done. I don't understand why this is so difficult. You should be able to type really fast on your phone. I should just ask you like 5 questions in a row. And then by the time it gets to you, yeah, you would love that.
All right, let's see.
We need to pick a time when they don't break my electrical grid or my network grid.
Hey, your internet held up though, so.
It did. I'm very excited by that.
All right. So if we're going a couple weeks, that would be 13th-ish, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Any chance we could do that morning? It could be late morning. So your voice.
Late morning, yeah.
Like 10 o'clock.
That should be fine.
Okay. My dad and stepmom are in town.
Cool.
So I don't want to be away too long for them, for their sake. Bookworm recording. 10 to noon. Michael Schmitz. Send. It's on the calendar. Don't let things break.
Oh, you know what? I should actually have you start sending these to a different email address.
I can change it right now.
Okay. Send it to that. Because I am moving away from Fantastical.
Okay.
And the previous email you had is an iCloud one. Like there's also a Gmail one, but for whatever reason, it always comes through on iCloud.
Okay. All right.
So,
I just sent it there.
Cool. Yeah, I've been using Cron.
Oh yeah, you mentioned this.
Yep, there it is. Boom. Okay, good. Because now this will also affect availability for
sorry, Blake.
New thing I need to talk to you about.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I can mention it to people who are still hanging out here, but I have been encouraged to offer implementation coaching for Obsidian.
Okay.
Through Obsidian University. So I'm thinking I'm going to do that. I floated the idea with people in the Q&A call yesterday.
Yeah.
There were like 20 people there, and 5 of them were like, yes, you absolutely need to do this.
Where do I sign up?
Yeah. So I need to put something together, figure out what I should charge for that, etc.
Blake really wanted you to read your email out loud so he could write you an email.
I'm going to write an email if Mike had read it out loud. I'm not sure what that means.
Instead of you texting me your email address, if you had said it out
Oh,
loud, he was going to
gotcha.
write you an email. I'm not prompting you to say it. I'm just letting you know that's what he wanted.
Find it. Yeah, I'm not going to read it out loud. Sorry.
All right, we should go. I'm going to go get this posted to the bootleg, get you a file.
Ready.
Did this break? This broke. I got to go over there to shut off the stream. Okay?
Okie dokie.
You can say bye while I go shut off. Okay? Bye.
All right. I'll just sit here and wave until